Are Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Dr. Emily Wilson. I am a naturopath and an acupuncturist here in Prescott, Arizona. And I am talking with Joseph McCaffrey, who is a licensed professional counselor here. He's also practicing in Prescott, and he has some really exciting focuses in his clinical practice, which is why I wanted to have the opportunity to sit down and talk with Joseph today, because I think that what he's doing is really amazing and is something that so many people need, and that is really on the forefront of uniting mental health with physical health, and then even bringing in the idea of soulful or spiritual health. So Joseph has a few clinical focuses, and one is ecopsychology, another is nature-based soul work, and then the third is a new one that he's beginning to explore, which is psychedelic assisted therapy for individuals. So Joseph, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Emily.
Yeah,
It's
how are you
great to be with
doing?
you. I'm doing well, really good. Yeah, enjoying this warm weather here before we turn into pumpkin madness and over the next month.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like it's maybe within the next week or so even.
Yeah, exactly.
It happens quickly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking some time to sit down and talk with me today. We actually talked a couple weeks ago, and then again last week, and I feel so strongly that the work that you're doing is so important and so needed for so many people, especially not only when we look at kind of the human condition and the crises that are happening in our collective health and healthcare, but also in our ecological and environmental health. So I'd love to hear from you a little bit about your work in ecopsychology, what drew you to that, and how you're using this. And maybe even you could talk a little bit about what ecopsychology means, because I think a lot of us still maybe are a little unclear on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. Thanks. Yeah. And as you're introducing me and you're bringing this up about what's happening, um, you know, just in the work that we do, I feel like there's a lot of complexity we're going to get into in eco-psychology and these different pieces. So as you're speaking here, I'm thinking about what is a good way to ground this and organize this in a way. And so one of the questions is coming up for me right away is, just thinking about the people that come to see us, like what they really want. And it's, I can imagine that, like what people really want. Um, And I often like to really hear that from the individual, but I'm just thinking and explaining and talking about this. My sense is that people want to be well. People want to feel connected, really connected to themselves, to the world. Um, a lot of people are suffering right now, and they want to shift kind of the state that they're in into a different state of feeling grounded and calm. And so, in talking about this, one of the ways I might just get into it is like, what is the pathway to that? And maybe the pathway to that is talking about what gets in the way of that. And so, with the perspective of eco psychology, which has so many different, it's such an emerging field in so many ways that there's so many different perspectives on it. But I think for me, the basis of eco psychology in my work stems out of this idea that comes from evolutionary psychology, that for over 1,000,000+ years, we humans lived in relationship with the natural world, and we, before grocery stores and thermostats, our rhythms, our evolution of who we are as humans was so directly related to this relationship with with the ecosystem in which we live, and the ecosystem of Gaia, or planet Earth, and the cosmos. And then something like 10, 12,000 years ago, we started on this path, really in the Western world, to, one could say, psychologically estrange ourselves, to move into a paradigm where we believe, or we let ourselves to believe, that we are disconnected from nature, and that, we're obviously not. We're deeply connected, as we're all experiencing globally right now. And so a lot of the work in ecopsychology is remembering, or coming into that connection with the natural world, and doing that again through, well, what is getting in the way of that? And it just so happens that it's both internal and external, in these different complexity of relationships over the last 10 to 12,000 years that have led to this disconnection, or this perceived disconnection that we're experiencing. And so what as my work evolves, it has really evolved from really starting to see this in many ways through the lens of complex trauma. And that's one of the other areas that I'm really diving into right now, is looking at developmental or complex trauma, and how that the systematic effect of that has caused a lot of challenges, not only mentally, but emotionally, psychologically, and physically.
Yeah. Can I share a really quick story with you that
Yes.
I think you might appreciate?
Yeah.
I shared with you earlier, Joseph, that I have been training for the Rim to Rim
Yes.
hike next month. And so we went on a big hike today, and it was a tough one. I got my butt kicked.
Uh-huh.
And I was out in the sun, climbing up rocks. There were bugs everywhere, and I was pretty miserable. I like kind of hated it, but I had this, I was trying to like be okay with the experience that was happening, that I felt like was happening to me. And I remember having this moment of thinking, well, two thoughts came up. One was like, how lucky am I that my life isn't a struggle like this every single day, and that this opportunity, like nature is there to teach us that we can be strong.
Mm-hmm.
I can do hard things,
Mm-hmm.
and I might think that I can't, but if I just keep trying, then eventually I can get there. And it was actually a really profound experience for me, because I did get there. I did get up that hill. I did like get through the bug cloud, and, got to a better place, not only physically, but also mentally and emotionally around that, because it was challenging. And I just thought, two of these cultures that have been living a lot closer to the earth than we usually do, and how those people climb up and down hills and mountains every single day, and they don't complain about it.
Mm-hmm.
So there was just this moment of like just awareness, and realizing that this is actually an opportunity to try and be better as a person than I'm asked to be when I'm living a very convenient and comfortable life.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah. In my experience, in a lot of my own ways, there has been this reciprocity, this continual reciprocity with the natural world, and that it's always happening. There's always a dialogue and conversation that's occurring, and it's about really slowing down and starting to open up in ways in which to get into that conversation, and not only receive what's happening around us in the natural world, but then how are we also giving back, right? Which is a real paradigm shift for us Westerners, because we have been, taught from really an early age, right? That, the way that we perceive the natural world is it is a resource for us. It is something that is there to serve us. And in many ways, we have forgotten how to go out into the natural world, asking permission, and really listening to, is it okay for me to be here, and is it okay to take from you. And often I would say yes. The overwhelming response is yes. Like that is the reciprocity. It's just doing it in a way where there is a little bit more balance and equality.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like a whole nother level of humbleness than I even felt this morning.
Yeah.
But you're right. You're absolutely right. You know, it's like we would never go into somebody else's house and just trample around and think that we could do whatever we wanted.
Yeah.
The idea
Yep.
of
Yeah.
asking permission.
So what I'm already inviting is to, you know, and as we talk about this, it's like even starting to recognize, well, like what comes up in us, even in this conversation about that. What are the feelings and the emotions and the thoughts and the experience that are arising within us as an opportunity to explore, okay, well, what, you know, again, what gets in the way of us having this dialogue and having this conversation and connecting to ourselves and in the natural world in that way. And what are, it's like even inviting just to a different state of consciousness around all of it, you know, than where we may be consciously or unconsciously engaging in the relationship with ourselves and the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really big question. And I feel my brain wanting to avoid it, to be honest with you. And I think because the depth of it is so huge, right? There's
Yeah.
so much there. And it actually brings me back to something that you had mentioned a little bit earlier, which was your work with complex trauma.
Yep.
I know that for a lot of people who have experienced trauma in the past, a way of not dealing with it is just the act of dissociation, of kind of separating yourself from even the mental process of going through trying to answer a tough question or figure out how we feel about something. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, about
Yeah.
complex trauma and your work there.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, so this is something I've been tracking in my own experience, and then with the people that I've been working with since the beginning, really before I was made this kind of huge life change from being an educator, working in middle school classrooms and elementary school classrooms, some higher ed classrooms, into becoming a therapist, really tracking something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. And in the beginning, I thought, okay, well, it's this loss of rites of passage. We've lost these rites of passage within our culture, and that's kind of a symptom of this field of complex trauma. What I'm learning, and so really to name the difference, right? There's shock trauma, like experiencing an event that's life threatening, and then there's complex trauma or developmental trauma, which has, you know, similar responses within our nervous system and our brain, but then there's some, as it's called, there's some complexities to it. Often when we experience developmental trauma, which is something like misattunement or not being fully gotten, like I wasn't gotten fully as a child. There's different strategies that manifest out of that. There's different responses to that, often a negative self-image or negative self-talk, challenges to establish healthy relationships, and really very intelligent and very important survival strategies. I would say in the Western world, in some way, that we all have experienced this developmental trauma in some way. We cannot on the spectrum get away from it. I think you would be very lucky to do so. And these intelligent responses, such as like dissociation or putting other needs before our own, you know, there's many different kind of survival strategy that rise up, are incredibly intelligent. It's the reason why you and I are sitting here today. And they can also, at the flip side, be really destructive at the same time. And so, you know, another way to think about this developmental trauma is that we can't see ourselves as a child as a good person in a bad situation. So what does that mean? So it essentially means when I'm a child, my primary caregivers are my universe. They are the only thing that's my universe. That's what I see. And if there is some environmental failure, whether it be abuse or just or misattunement or not feeling gotten, it puts us in this incredible dilemma, a very hard bind, because we need to survive to connect to that primary caregivers. But at the same time, it can be very terrifying. And so what we do unconsciously is that we can't perceive our universe as bad, our caregivers as bad. So we internalize it as something wrong with us. So already we're kind of set up. It's interesting because one of the things that I see so often in us is just a negative self-talk. We're so critical of ourselves, especially in our society today. And that's one piece that often really comes out of this. And then this disconnect from ourselves and the world. And it becomes this deepest longing. The Dr. Heller, who I'm studying it, he created the NARM Institute, the Neuroaffective Relationship Model, where I'm studying. He quotes saying, our deepest longing is connection and our deepest fear is connection. Right? Because it's both. We so deeply long to have this connection with another, but in the sense, because of this experience that we have, it's terrifying. And we've developed these strategies over our time to keep us safe from that full connection because of the emotions, our response that may come up from that. And this is why I believe that the ecotherapy piece is fundamental in this, because spending time in the natural world, like you were talking about, it just opens us up to this sense of connection and feeling safe for a lot of us. Now, that's tricky too, because we could get into, the diversity of history that socially and economically and otherwise that we've experienced. So the natural world might not feel safe for everybody. So I really want to acknowledge that that's true for a lot of people as well.
Right.
And often it does provide us, especially within a safe container, such as ecotherapy, an opportunity to start to begin to experience really a non-judgmental connection and relationship to something beyond ourselves.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah,
That's
that's
huge.
a little, yeah.
That's awesome. And you had mentioned too, and the idea of some of the work you do being soul-based work.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how you use your work, the soul-based work, to help address some of these things. Because I think a lot of people, I don't think I've ever met anybody who was not engaged in negative self-talk. I think so many of us are guilty of seeing ourselves in a poor light. And
Yeah.
so I'm super curious about that work that you do.
Yeah. So, so just to set it up a little bit, I find myself in a really, really challenging dilemma as a licensed professional counselor, because there seems to be an idea that an individual is experiencing some kind of pathological diagnosis, say it may be anxiety or depression, symptoms of PTSD or now complex PTSD, and they're coming to me, and I'm going to provide them with some sort of treatment or solution that's going to help them to feel better so that they can go back and live their life.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm seeing from a soul-centric ecological perspective is that we are living in a world that is really in complete madness right now. It's absolutely chaotic. It is in great conflict environmentally. I mean, in every pretty much institution, in every system we are facing, there's trouble right now. And so in the Western model, it feels like I'm colluding with this idea that what we had deemed this madness that we've now called normal. I'm colluding with that. And there's no relationship with the individual's experience and the greater wild world. And that's not to put blame on anything. It's just to acknowledge that, I would define an individual as a manifestation. This is kind of my definition. This is a little philosophical, but it's a manifestation of a complex interpersonal and intrapersonal relationships over space and time, that like you can't disqualify these complexity of relationships and how they're showing up in an individual. Okay. So all of that being said, right, that I'm not going to collude that there is something normal going on out there, and there doesn't need to be systematic change that then leads to the wellness of humans. Like, that is true for me. And so I'm kind of stuck in this bind right now. And so for me, the soul work, the nature-based soul work, has been deeply transformational on my end, is also about cultural change. And so I'm always holding an individual in that context. We may not even discuss any of that we might be simply focusing on symptoms, lowering symptoms of anxiety, shifting a state change, understanding where that anxiety is manifesting from, getting to a state they want to get to and what's getting in the way of that. But I'm holding this bigger context in the sense that, right, that healing is really a crisis of opportunity. It's like an initiation. And that's not to say that someone who experienced, not the event of, say, a trauma is part of the initiation, but the opportunity to heal what has come out of that is the initiation into not only feeling better, starting to have that energy flow, have our body come to a sense of organization, but also then there's an opportunity to discover something else, maybe unimaginable, something maybe that was talked about within our ancestors, all of our ancestors, probably 12,000 plus years back, that there is something else here, that we are part of a bigger story, that we fit into the story of the universe or the story of the earth, and each of us have a place to roll, a place to play in that, and that discovering that and embodying that could enrich a little part of the world. And then if each of us enriched just a little small part of the world, then we would have such a tidal wave of change, that that would lead to that flow between not only what's happening internally, but externally within society and culture and all these different places. So it's complex, right? It's very complex as I'm talking about it. And yet the simplicity in it is this: soul work is destabilizing, therapy is stabilizing, meaning that therapy is about reorganizing yourself, healing yourself, getting to a place where you feel organized, grounded, and you can look around and have a sense of connection to yourself and to the world. Okay, we arrived there. Now we're able to come into potentially a place of authenticity where we can start living authentically. And then soul is going to destabilize us. It's going to destabilize all of that, because soul is going to ask something unimaginable of us, something that goes against the norms of our family and society, because that is how we come into healthy evolution and change, is to shake things up.
Yes.
Right? To shake things up is to change. That's what we're, in a sense, that's what we're experiencing on the planet right now, is a crisis of change. And if we can if we would orient ourselves to this crisis, that it is something that like our ego says, this is terrible. And it is. There's loss and grief and pain and many things that aren't good about this. However, if we could hold it in the context of this is an opportunity of evolution, we could shift our relationship to it in a very different way. And that's what I'm really inviting within ourselves and each of the people that I work with and myself, is how do we resource ourselves enough? How do we heal enough that we can start to hold this as an opportunity of change and growth, and stepping into something that not only serves us, but serves the greater community, both the human and the non-human world, or the more than human world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so huge.
Yeah.
It also is so exciting. I think I've been doing some reading and some personal work this year that's kind of taking me down these very scary new roads, because they are things that the safe side of me would never want me to do.
Yes.
Um,
Exactly.
there was that pull, that inner
Uh,
pull, that thing that made me do it even though I kind of didn't want to.
yeah. But yet, right, my hunch is there's something really, you could say, alluring about it,
Yeah,
right? Would it be true to say that it felt both really alluring, I feel really drawn to this, but at the same time really dangerous?
absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. But I
Yeah.
also knew I could not do it.
Exactly. Because there's a deep, what's the risk if you wouldn't do it?
Less than a full life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, um, that can be very destabilizing because that asks so much of us to step into those roles. And so there is a very huge difference here, right? That although we might be really longing to go into the soul work, we always have to ask the question, are we ready yet?
Yeah.
And our wholeness can say no. And then the next question always is, well, what do we need to do to ready ourselves? Right. And this isn't a competition. In the Western world, we're so programmed for this idea of progress no matter what. Right. And this is why it's so challenging, and it has been for me, because it isn't a process of progress or getting somewhere, right? It's actually about experiencing most fully where we're at. And then from there can be an opportunity of almost like a shift of our center of gravity that then moves us from one territory to the next, that allows for this risky behavior that you're talking about of of living a full life.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Um, as Mary Oliver would say, what would you do with this one wild and precious life?
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's funny because I was thinking of an inner compass, where your inner compass directs you.
yeah,
But I'm curious too. So this is all amazing. And I feel like even the work I do, which my training is certainly on, physical health rather than mental and emotional and soulful work.
yeah.
But my own healing and my interests have kind of taken me into that realm a bit. And I'm curious to hear about how you're using this whole new branch of healing that you're entering
Mhm.
in this work of how are you using psychedelic assisted therapy
Yeah.
to assist people in kind of expanding and
Yeah.
reaching that full life.
Okay, so there's a short answer I'll give you. I've been doing the long answer because I think it's really important. Because I just want to acknowledge this first and foremost, because it, in my own soul work, there seems, soul speaks to us in images and metaphors, and it seems that a lot of those images and metaphors are aligning with working with non-ordinary states of consciousness. and um, and just to say a little bit about that, we are the first kind of group of people in the world's history who haven't seen non-ordinary states of consciousness as something deeply powerful, a place of healing, a place of mystery, a place of knowledge. And in fact, we've pathologized them. There's no framework within our society at the moment that holds non-ordinary states of consciousness as an opportunity for this, right? And so um, the work that I've done at Animas Valley Institute, we have done what you could say, I would say, in some ways, non-medicine based, non-ordinary states of consciousness, fasting on the land for 4 days, wandering on the land and using our imagination to animate the natural world, which means everything's ensouled and alive and being in conversation with it. Drumming, rhythmic drumming to help shift our consciousness. So it's been deeply impactful for me.
Mhm.
And I'm also recognizing, as a white male, that there has been thousands of years of lineages of wisdom passed down, of peoples who have worked with medicine specifically around non-ordinary states of consciousness, and that there's a huge responsibility with it and a deep humility and reverence that comes with it. And so I just want to say, as I, that's how I'm approaching this, is that I have a lot to learn and little bit to say about it. And I think that what we're calling psychedelic assisted therapy has the potential to provide an opportunity for individuals to experience healing and what you may call something transpersonal, which could be soul, which is often into the depths of ourselves, and spirit, which I would say is something bigger than ourselves. And so my hope for psychedelic medicines coming into our society is that it's going to begin to bridge this gap between healing, how we see healing right now, and discovering something deep within ourselves and within the world that leads to this systematic cultural change that we need so badly, because a lot of what we're talking about is extremely privileged, and a lot of folks don't have access not only to these modalities, but even the thoughts and the ideas that are coming to this conversation.
Yes.
And so it's really important, in my opinion, that all of this weaves together to provide not only, what you would call, I guess, equality, but equanimity, that everyone starts to have resources and an opportunity to access this.
God, that would be an amazing world, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
One that hopefully is not too far away.
Yeah. And then I will say I'm studying, just so let's put in the practicality too. So I'm studying MDMA assisted therapy through MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. They've been doing research now for over 20 years. They're in their second round of phase 3 clinical trials. And they've been treating specifically PTSD with MDMA therapy. So MDMA should be legal with therapy. It's going to be the first drug the FDA has deemed deschedulized and made legal for treatment with therapy.
Right.
We can talk more about that if you'd like. But what we're finding is that after 3 experiential MDMA sessions, 12 non-medicine 90-minute therapy sessions, that individuals are experiencing 67% success rate. So 60% of the people no longer qualify for PTSD diagnosis. And after a year, it's up to 83%, and people start getting better. And what they're finding is individuals are getting off of SSRIs, their medication. They're no longer using opiates. So not only are they healing, but they're being able to free themselves. I'm careful with my language here, but in a sense, the prison of pharmaceuticals, right? That, that's a harsh way to say it. That might be a little too hard way to say it, but they're freeing themselves in a way that they begin to fully have an opportunity to live in the world. And they're predicting that actually once they're out of the FDA protocols and they can do more sessions, like maybe a 4th session, that the results will go up to above 90% success. So the tools that we have coming are going to provide such an opportunity for healing. And what I love about the mission at MAPS is they're talking about scaling, they're talking about bringing this to individuals that can't afford it, that don't have access to their insurance paying for it. There's a lot of work being done on the forefront to provide this healing modality to a lot of individuals. And it's becoming more accepted. There's money in the VA coming towards this. They've treating a lot of veterans. There's a bipartisanship around this now. There's a lot of great, wonderful things happening. And the narrative, and we won't go too deep into this, but the narrative that has come out of the war on drugs that has been deeply harming to so many people is beginning to shift and change. And we're starting to understand the opportunity and the potential of these medicines in ways that we haven't before. And there's a lot of wonderful people on the ground floor doing a lot of work for this. And I'm just so grateful for them, for that work that they're doing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You said too, not only are people getting off of SSRIs, but opiates.
Yeah.
No is a crisis. And it kind of opened my mind up to the idea that, you know, here we are again, back at the intersection of body, mind, everything else that we are.
Yeah.
So maybe, you know, exploring these non-ordinary states of consciousness is a way not only to address some mental health concerns like anxiety, depression, or PTSD, but also things like chronic pain.
Yeah.
Which is
absolutely
fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you know, so I had an experience, a health crisis about, 8 years ago now. And I experienced an overactive thyroid. I was losing a lot of weight, on the edge of kind of an autoimmune disease. And I started to work in naturopathic medicine at that time. And what I realized a lot, and I'm realizing even more now, but what I found was the support from the naturopathic medicine to help the symptoms of my body, the physical symptoms, receive support, opened up. It gave me more vitality than to go into the inner psychological, spiritual crisis that was also occurring within me.
Wow.
So this is what I'm really excited about. Our opportunity to connect and collaborate is because I just feel it is so important to have both. And from a complex trauma perspective, what in this model I'm learning about, there's this connection survival style, which is essentially this first dilemma we find ourselves, this longing to connect, this fear of connection. And again, what I mentioned before is not being able to see ourselves as a good person in a bad situation. We attack ourselves, right? And what they're actually finding is that for individuals that we all have different, there's more survival styles, and we all have all of them. And depending on often what situation we're in, we move into one or the other, and we often embody one more than the other. And they found that folks who embody this connection survival strategy more, survival style, are more often susceptible to autoimmune disease, which is the body attacking itself, right? So psychologically, we begin to attack ourselves at the early developmental stage. And then later in life, we are predisposed to these other, what would you call them?
Physical manifestations, right?
Yeah. And so the support, right? So it's, to me, the holistic support, like everything. It's like a bicycle wheel doesn't work well with one spoke, right? It works well with a lot of spokes. All these different spokes on the wheel provide this opportunity for individuals to really heal.
Yes.
In ways that, was not ever talked about or available coming from the region of Western Pennsylvania in a small blue collar town that I came from. I don't even know if I heard the word healing growing up. The idea that we could heal. I was thinking about this the other day. Did I even hear that word? And I experienced a lot of developmental trauma from the Educational Institute, and certainly within my family as well, although I also had a lot of stability within my family. And so I had both. And so this really lands in me, like personally, like I've had this experience. I've had, that connection survival style and the strategies come out of that, and that attacking of myself and those beliefs
Yeah.
that I carried from being a dyslexic learner in a punishment-based system, right? That I internalized as my fault because I couldn't see, the teachers and the environment that was failing around me essentially as bad. So I internalized it about me. So I experienced it, but I also got the opportunity to experience the support of naturopathic medicine supporting my body, Animas Valley Institute supporting my psyche and soul, and other medicines supporting this broader transpersonal context that allowed for a more complete opportunity to heal and experience the world in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's so amazing how I think most people who are drawn to any kind of healing field have their own story. We've all been
Yeah.
through something that's brought us here.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Yeah. And that narrative, to be able to say, hey, this brought me here as and it shifts from this is happening to me, because I think that's part of the journey, to this brought me here. Wow, that provides us with such opportunity to experience the world really differently. And that's really my wish, that like we could begin to talk about healing in that way globally. Well, at least society, this maybe just in our society to start.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm so excited when I hear about the work that you're doing because, like I said, I think that it's something that we need very much. And I think that for the people that you're gonna, that you're working with here in Prescott, how lucky are we that we have someone like you here?
Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. I
Yeah.
mean it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, is there anything else that you were hoping that you wanted to share, or just let people know about as far as your work or who you are, or um,
Well, I think that you know, just beginning to ask ourselves the question, I just always just really want to offer this, like, what you really want in your life. What is it that you really want? And just even beginning to feel what it's like to ask yourself that, what do I really want? And then to allow that or invite that to offer the movement towards finding someone that can help work with what's getting in the way of bringing forth what you really want.
yeah,
And I would love to be a part of that. I'm very excited about being a part of that. So when just the gratitude and the honor it is to when people walk into our office, and the opportunity to work with them is such a it's such a gift. It's like two souls meeting each other.
yeah,
It
exactly.
just so happens that we're two souls meeting each other, and it goes both ways. And so much of this work, as I'm sure you experienced, goes both ways. It's it's a it's almost selfish to get to be a helper and show up here. So I'm just really excited about, and grateful for the fine people at the Arizona Board of Behavioral Health of presenting me with this license to start working and opening up a practice here, having the opportunity to collaborate with you, and beginning to dream into all of this that we've chatted about today.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
gonna be amazing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, thank you again so much. And I love that you kind of wrapped it up with the question of what do I really want? Because it's a huge question. And too often we don't even stop to think about what we really want anymore. We
Yeah.
get so caught up in the day to day. And
Yeah.
a lot of my work with women too is about, once you know what you want in your healthcare, then you have to make sure that you're resourced enough. You're coming from that place of valuing yourself enough to do what you have to do to get there. And so
Yeah.
I love that. And I'm so excited to see more and more of your work and how, what you're doing helps people on that front too.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for talking with me today and taking the time to share a little bit about what you do. Because like I said, I think it's really important work and I'm so excited to collaborate with you.
Yeah. Well, you too. I just completely admire what you're up to and your vision and what you're offering to our community. I think, again, it's enriching these little places so that we can start to enrich the greater world.
Absolutely. That's what it's
Yeah.
all about. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Joseph.
All right.
Yeah, this was wonderful. Is there anything else you wanted to share? I think I already asked you, but I guess I'll ask you one more time. Anything else before we say goodbye for today?
No, thank you. Thank you for your time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.